welcome to this session on Gold from the Grave. It's a Marathi short story written by Anna Babusate. And today, Mridula and I will going to focus primarily on the regional specificities and the implications of this kind of regionalism for cultural uniqueness and other related affairs. So I hope you're going to enjoy the session. So Mridula, what do you think in your perspective tells you that this story belongs to this particular region from India?
In this short story, we can find a lot of references that particularly specifies, that refers to the region of Maharashtra. The first instance that I can point out is the description of Bhima, where the writer talks about his outfit, and he specifies that it is a Satara outfit, and he describes about his outfit in detail. Satara is actually a district in Maharashtra, and when he describes the outfit, you can see that it is very much indigenous to Akkad. First of all, you can see this outfit in most of the northern parts of the country. But probably I think we can root it to Maharashtra itself, because he is specifying that it's a Satara outfit, and he talks about the outfit in detail. He says that it is a red it comprises of a red turban, a yellow dhoti, and a shirt which is thick with coarse blade. So that is one. And then there is this instance where he talks about Bhima's village, and he says that the village is situated in the banks of river Varna. Varna river is it is in Maharashtra again, so we can see that there are a lot of references that says that the story is set in Maharashtra. And there is also this mention of tola. Tola is again a unit of measurement, and that also signifies a lot.
Unit of measurement in the language, and so we kind of anchor it, the story, in that particular language.
And then there is also this mention of Kurla. Kurla is actually a neighborhood of East Mumbai, and here in the story there is this reference which says that Kurla is a place where Bhima goes to sell the gold and collect cash. So probably it is a marketplace, so where people can purchase a lot of things. So that is also very important. So from all these instances, we can understand that the story is set in Maharashtra.
Yeah, absolutely. And we have the reference to Mumbai itself, isn't it? Which clearly gives us this big sign saying that this story comes from a particular state, a particular region of India, right? So it's on page 107 in my collection. The narrator says that Mumbai had everything except work and shelter, right? And a couple of lines before that, Bhima's village was a long way off on the banks of the Varna. However, seeing that even his bull-like strength could not fill his stomach there, he had moved to Mumbai. So he is from the outskirts. He's from a village, which is outside of Mumbai, but to find work, he moves to Mumbai. So we are told that he is a migrant, and he is migrating to this city of Mumbai to find work, and in that pursuit he fails. So you can immediately get a set of associated images, right? Mumbai, a village outside of it, and then the references that you pointed out in terms of Satara outfit, which has a particular set of accessories, clothing accessories, and then you have the language, coming through, in this English translation through the word kola, right, which is a unit for measurement. So all these cues, all these cultural and language cues tell us that this story emerges from a particular landscape, a particular kind of cultural economy, right? Are there any other references which tell you that this story also belongs to the larger Indian identity? Any other set of images, scenes which kind of tell you, yes, it belongs to the Indian nation, the story?
Um, it the story itself gives a very a clear-cut idea of how unemployment works in a lot of in various levels. And the story of this Bhima being somebody who's very poor, who lives in these kind of places, it also brings out this image of slums.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
so that can be brought in a larger context. That is one. In the story, there is this mention of symmetry and ritual rites that are related to it. So, in although you cannot say that those ritual rites and things are just particular to the region, but you can say that it is very much Indian.
Yeah.
Because there's this, I can just pick out an instance where the writer talks, I just quote what the writer says. It's like, pushing aside shattered pots and battered wires, he jumped from this grave to that. So when you go to a graveyard, especially an Indian graveyard, this is what is something that you can expect. This image of shattered pots and it evokes a lot of things that are related to death and the rites that are associated with the death.
Yeah.
There are a lot of ceremonies related to it.
True. Okay, let me just kind of pick up from what you said, at the beginning. So we do get scenes of poverty. We get that. We get houses which are run down, right? Dilapidated houses, and that's very kind of sharply described by the narrator. The narrator states that the huts were made of old tin sheets, mats, planks, and sacks, and those houses contained people, cast of things, sheltering the cast of people. So this kind of shelter is something that is a sight that we can recognize in many regions, in the suburbs and in the villages, right? So that's kind of not unique to India, but it's a common sight, especially in certain pockets, not everywhere, in certain pockets. So that's one thing. So you can see how the story is also relating to the larger, Indian speciality itself as a big entity, right? It has regional qualities such as in all these, and there's also a reference to roti. Remember, the wife is patting bakars into shape. So that element, that particular term to refer to roti, the big pancake, the flat pancake, right? So all these regional elements are there, which kind of tell us that this story is kind of emerging from the cultural lifestyle of particular people, and at the same time there are other scenes which tell us that this kind of scenes are also familiar to different parts of the nation, right? We belong to the larger Indian identity, and at the same time there are unique elements as well, right? So that's something we need to recognize. And the idea of migration is also pretty common. People going from one region to another, they don't remain rooted to one particular region all through their lives. They move for various reasons, for education, but in the story they move for making ends meet, to make for survival, to put it simply. They move for survival. So this element is there. The other point that you referred to is the ritual rites. Yes, the ritual rites. Here we need to be a bit, specific, because at one point in the story, what's his name? Bhima tells us that the rich bury gold, with the dead, but the poor don't have the luxury of doing that. So even though certain rituals are common to the general mass, there are minor variations within those rituals, right? And those rituals kind of tell us to which class the dead belong to, right? And he rants at certain points in the story and says that only the rich have the right to die, and so on and so forth. There's no clear-cut rationale to the rant. If you read it very closely, he thinks he says things paradoxically, he goes back and forth, but all we get to kind of understand or comprehend is that he's immensely resentful and bitter and angry with the society around him. But to come back to the point about rituals, so yes, there are references to rituals which are kind of cued in those items, the buyers, the broken pots, which are all part of the ritual, accessories, right? But there are also minor variations which are interesting because we also understand that those rituals are malleable, right? Rituals are kind of modified and changed to suit the needs of individual needs and desires. Right. So while there is regional element, while there is national element, there is also the individual element, which is kind of structured by wealth, right? The amount of money that you possess, right? That also defines your lifestyle. So all these internal variations and diversities are there, right? Okay. Anything else that you think are unique to the Indian or the regional?
Actually, Bhima's wife is very much unhappy about his occupation. Earlier, he was working in a quarry.
Yeah.
And then he left. He lost his job, so he had to shift to this vocation. So there's this superstition that is related to people going to cemeteries. People are really scared about going to cemetery. There is this lot of the cemetery is definitely associated with ghosts and other things. So wife doesn't like him going to cemeteries in the first hand.
Yeah.
And maybe because she has moral issues.
Yeah.
Because of him doing
you
something
can
very
quote,
ghastly.
You can quote those related passages.
You're going somewhere, aren't you? I don't think what you are doing is right. You should find some other way to make a living. Corpses, ashes, gold. This existence is all wrong. People brand. And she stopped abruptly. So, one thing is the moral issue. Second thing is that she is scared that people will brand him with certain names or like she may be also scared that he will be possessed by ghosts.
Yes.
Because that is what we mostly think. Like that is why people are scared of going to cemeteries, which is I don't know whether that can be seen only in our country, but but still we can also. This is something that we can commonly hear.
Yes.
People will not go to cemeteries after sunset and things like that. So he's doing that, and his wife is against it.
Yeah. Correct. So I'm going to pick up on the first point in your discussion. The first point was about the quarry work that he did, right? It's apparent that he did like that work, that honest labor, right? And he enjoys working on those hills, breaking rocks, and it's pretty interesting the way that idea of breaking things gives him an immense joy and satisfaction, right? If you go back to that passage, it says, as he put all his bull-like might to work, he seemed to almost challenge the hill. He lifted his pickaxe and the hill would recoil. As the sledgehammer rose, the dark rock face would flinch. The contractor was happy with him. Bhima too was contented as he was getting a wage. Right? So it's a very, very metaphoric passage if you look at it closely. He's challenging the hill. The hill becomes a massive personification of a human being now, and he likes to challenge and he likes to win that battle. The hill is recoiling, right? Moving back in fear. And the contractor was happy because Bhima is such a good worker. He would have broken a lot of rocks, and Bhima was contented too because he was getting a steady wage and he had shelter for his family, right? And this kind of fighting, this kind of challenge that Bhima throws at his opponent is something that runs through the entire story, and that's what happens later on in the second section of the story when he fights with the jackals and he fights with the cops. to get the piece of gold, right? So you can see his desire to fight, the desire to resist, the desire to challenge and extract something back in order to keep his survival going, in order to keep his family have its kitchen fires going, right? So this is an interesting image because that image kind of reappears in different ways in the various sections that we see in the story. The next thing is, as I pointed out, the jackals which are attacking him and kind of fights with them, and he enjoys that fight. You can see that, right? And he likes to win. He likes to win. And the same with the cops too. He treats the cops as a living thing and fights with the cops, right? He kind of throws curses at the cops, and then and he finally emerges victorious. So there's something unique to Bhima's personality that we see all through the story. The idea of resistance, right? The idea of resistance and challenging the other, right? And the other point that I want to print out, and which also ties in with the national identity, is that parallel that the narrative brings about the Pandavas, right? He is compared to Kunti's Bhima, isn't it? So you can see how this particular man from Maharashtra who has this name Bhima is kind of associated with the larger Hindu idea, which is kind of embedded in that myth, in that scripture, in that epic, and when you kind of put him in that kind of larger national scale, he becomes a representative of the struggling Indian man.
Yes.
Right? So the regional element takes a back seat when you kind of associate him with the national, mythology and national religious epic. Right? So in that way, again, the regional becomes marginal and the national identity emerges pretty strongly, right? So I want to come back to that point about the wife that you made. Again, the gender identity is something which is not unique to this particular story. Right, the idea of the shashed wife, right? Yeah, it's kind of prevalent everywhere, right, across the nation in terms of the literature that we read. I'm not saying that that's the case in practical everyday reality. I'm saying that in many instances of Indian literature, we get these images of oppressed wives who are kind of dominated by their husbands, and Bhima's wife is one such example. Right? And you can also connect it with other representations, say from Yushka Natsnagamadulan, right? So this Marathi wife is akin to the Kannada wife, right? And you can also find parallels with Punjabi feminine representations, especially in the case of Billeri, right? Who doesn't get any responses, right? When she asks a question, Manak is quiet, silent. So this kind of silent oppression is also another dimension to the feminine identity. So I'm not saying that this is the only representation that we get of the female, the Indian woman, but this is one of the major images that we seem to get. There are, of course, there are variations, and one such variation would be, say, for example, in summer vacation. We haven't read that particular story for this one, for this course, but you get a very powerful matriarch, right, in summer vacation, into the figure of the grandmother. And for example, in Karamal Burden's, the man who could not sleep, the wife is kind of not quite at all, right? She kind of talks back on and on and on, and the husband is used to that kind of resistance, right? The predominant, what I'm trying to say is that the predominant gender identity also ties this story with the rest of the regions, the rest of the states of India, and that seems to be also part of the national identity with respect to the literature that we read. Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to add to in this context of different kinds of identities that we get in the story?
Relating to this typical household wife, although she is not given a name in the story, and she does not have a actually she doesn't have any part in the story, but passing references and comments through which we understand that we have this wife, wife character. I think we do not know whether to sympathize with Thema or like should we reprimand him because he is kind of, he's not rude, but he doesn't give the kind of respect that he should give to his wife. But at the same time, we tend to sympathize with him because we understand that he's doing all these things because he wants to provide for his wife and for his child. And even after going back to this, even after going to this graveyard, and then he comes back with gold coins, all he thinks about is getting a sari for his wife, getting a petticoat for his daughter, and grapes. Dates, yes.
So the sari, the petticoat, and the blouses for the wife, and the dates for the child.
So we understand that there's this loving husband and loving, caring father out there.
Absolutely. Yes, correct. So again, that gender identity won't essentialize Bhima's character. The male, the husband, the father is supposed to kind of look after, provide for his dependents, which means his wife and children, and he wants to do that job properly, and to kind of fulfill his assigned roles in society, he does all these things. You can kind of reduce it to his gender identity, and he doesn't care about the kind of or the nature of the job he performs to make sure that he fulfills those husbandly and fatherly duties, right? And I want to return to the point that you made earlier about the wife's worry about being affected by the nature of the job that he does. Yes, there are several reservations. She has several reservations. One is that he might be attacked by ghosts, and the second is that people might look at him as a criminal for grave digging, for robbing graves, and so there are a multitude of fears on the part of the wife, and this fear is not very particular only the Indian wife. You can see, if you read other literature, when we have scenes such as these, the female has these set of, responses to this kind of meddling with graveyards. The main point here is that, again, the gender identity, which kind of matches with the gender roles assigned to men, which you can see in other, literature from other regions as well, right? So, if you look at, under the Pritam's, the stage of Kerosene, we have Malak the farmer, right? Even the Guleri is doing all the household work, just as this wife of Bhima is doing all the preparation and all the household chores. Each have their own kind of assigned duties which they are expected to fulfill. To come back to your earlier point about should we sympathize with Bhima or not, the answer is the story is set up in such a way that the narrator kind of tells you how to react to him, right? And at the end of the novel, at the end of the story, you have Bhima crying over what he has done, right? He has lost a couple of fingers, but the very next day he realizes that there's work to be had, right? And he cries over those over the loss of those heel-breaker fingers, and the narrator kind of summarizes the story in a kind of moralistic way, and tells us, see, this is the result of excessive greed. Right? If you're extremely greedy, this is what you would get, and perhaps we can also, see it in this way. Bhima suffers this because he has meddled with things he shouldn't have meddled, right? So in some sense, you get you kind of realize that perhaps the wife was right. If you kind of meddle with cemeteries, with cremation grounds, with corpses and bodies, you will have to pay for it one way or the other. The curse might descend on the family or on the person who was doing it, and the curse seems to have descended on Bhima himself. And Bhima himself kind of realizes that, right? He thinks that it's the dead man attacking him for what he has done to the dead man. Right? At one point in the story, page 111 in my collection, he says, The narrator says he felt the corpse's teeth cut into his fingers. He froze, thinking, "This is a real ghost. Today it will catch me and hand me over to the people who will kill me because I'm desecrating this body." So what he's doing is desecration, right? So it's taboo. You're not supposed to meddle with the dead, and he thinks that the corpse itself is trying to catch him and hand him over to the people who will kind of punish him. So one thing you realize that the narrator knows what Bhima is thinking in his mind, right? He's a very omniscient narrator who knows about everything, even the internal thought process of Bhima, right? The other thing is that Bhima thinks that his payday has come, right? He realizes deep down that what he's doing is wrong,
Yeah.
morally wrong, but he has to do it so that his family survives. So that he could give a decent, lifestyle to his family, clothes for the wife, food for the child, right? So he is kind of justifying the subversion of certain rules in society because he has to fulfill his gender roles, right? So you can now realize that these are these are contradicting one another, isn't it? The societal rules and the expectations of masculinity seem to be kind of in opposition to one another, isn't it? So he has to choose one over the other. Either obey the rules of society and give up on his family, or protect the family at any cost and give up on the rules and regulations of the society. Right? So we do get similar scenarios in Premchand's Shroud as well. You know, similar kind of setups where the men choose to do one thing against the other, and repercussions follow. So a good secondary read for the story would be Premchand's story. Anything else you want to pick up on in this discussion?
I'd like to point out what you have talked about earlier about the comparison that can be made with this character and that of the mythological character.
Yes.
There is this, right from the start, the author has made a conscious effort to bring that comparison outwardly. Like when he says that he looked like a proper wrestler. Again, we want
Yes.
proper wrestler.
Yes.
Then when he talks about his strength, he says he has his bull-like strength, which is again when we talk about the strength of Bhima, again we say that he had the strength of 1,000 elephants. That reference is again specified towards the end of the story.
Elephant like
Bhima.
Yeah.
So, and again, you can even extend this idea of him using this crowbar with that of Bhima's wings.
Yes, very good.
I don't know why author wanted us to think this character in relation to the mythological Bhima. Maybe the two characters had the similar dilemma. They had to do something which they did not want to do, maybe, because in mythology, in Mahabharata also, he had to go and he had to kill his own kith and kin.
Fantastic.
So he was doing something which was against his conscience, but he had to do it.
For Dharma.
So that similarity can be drawn.
Yeah, it's an interesting way to put it. Yes, that parallel between the Bhima from the Mahabharata is very consciously sketched in this Bhima from Maharashtra, right, from a village on the outskirts of Mumbai. Is very consciously stretched, especially the physical strength and his insistence on challenging people, society, his battle hardiness which comes through in whatever he does, making the hill flinch, right? And that immediately, evokes images of Mahabharata's Bhima. So that's there. And you might also have a point when you state that perhaps he's forced to do certain things which he wouldn't do given the right circumstances, right? So just grading, robbing cemeteries and attacking causes is not something that he would do if he was reasonably comfortable, So all these things are there. But what my sense in reading this parallel is this: the author is trying to kind of compare or make this Bhima and every man and every Indian man who's hardy, who is strong, who wants to work, who is eager for hard labor, and who is very meticulous about providing for his family and all that. So all these attributes of the every man, is there in Bhima from the Mahabharata and Bhima from this particular story from Maharashtra. So they represent the ordinary citizen who wants to do the right thing by his family, right? So that's something perhaps the author wants to communicate. So he's taking this man from this particular region and turns him into an Indian figure in the story, who represents any man who wants to care for his family. And that kind of idea is brought through this kind of parallel with the epic, with the scripture. Yeah. So that's perhaps the reason as well, I think, for the heavy metaphorical treatment given to that battle scene with the jackals, right? Yes, absolutely. So that it becomes a kind of a battlefield.
Yes.
The war front, where this man single-handedly is kind of fighting with the jackals, with the ultimate goal of providing for his family, right? And it's very interesting that reference to dates comes up twice in the story, right? That's all he has in his mind when he goes home. He wants to, get dates for the child, and this. The fatherly concern for the child is something which is very moving and touching and profound as well, because we do get similar images in other stories as well. For example, I've been not doing that story for this course, but Tagore's Kabuliwala, right? Where Minnie gets dates from the Kabuliwala regularly because the father kind of asks him to come in and sell all these stuff, and so the dates becomes a symbol for affection itself, for love, warmth, nurture, and all these associated ideas. And that idea is again, mentioned in this particular story. We can see the connections from this Maratha story to the Bengali story, and to other stories, I'm sure, where we can see a very moving image of the father providing for his offspring, right? Yeah, so we are moving into the national scale, right? So we got to remember that this course is titled Modern Indian Writing and Translation. So while there are regional specificities, spatial, peculiarities, cultural peculiarities, we do get a larger Indian identity, a larger Indian self in the making in all these stories. Yeah. So the commonality is something that we should recognize as well. What I have jotted down in terms of that big scene, the extended scene between the battle scene between the jackals and Bhima, is heavily metaphorical, drawing on the primitive fight between the animals and the humans for food and survival. So it's a very primitive idea as well, the fight for survival, the fight for food, and that's something which we need to acknowledge. And there's this clash over gold and copse. Again, that's a kind of an universal fight. It's a fight for survival there, isn't it?
Yes.
And there's another image, the image of the lanterns, people approaching with lanterns.
Yes.
Right? When they hear the sound of the jackals, which wake up the dogs, and the dogs barking, and the villagers getting up and coming towards the center with the lanterns. And I was reminded of the other story, the blue light, right? We have that lantern, the hurricane man, right? So again, all these recurrent images of darkness with the contrasting image of light, right? And again, that kind of very evocative image is a signifier for the rural life, right? The rural life with minimal comfort such as electricity and other things. Yeah, so that's a very interesting image. There are also references to the green scenario, the landscape. At the beginning of the story, we have references to green trees, a massive tamarind tree. So we do get, natural cover. The green landscape is referenced, but we get so taken up with this kind of very gory, wild, scenes between Bhima and hot, rough terrain and wild beasts that we tend to forget all these, spatial cues. I think we need to remember that this is also taking place in a jungle, quote unquote. It's metaphorically a jungle as well. Physically, there are a lot of greens, spaces, woods. So it's jungle in double sense, because there is a battle for survival between the beast and the human, for food, for money, for survival, and at the same time, it's literally a jungle with all these, animals fighting with Bhima, right? And he also brings up the reference to moneylenders. Moneylenders keep coming up, once again telling us that money was hard to get, and people had to kind of borrow money from all these figures, and we have an associated set of ideas about moneylenders, right? Who are very hard, cruel, and stingy with money, and these poor people are in the grips of such moneylenders. So we know what kind of character a moneylender is, and when Bhima is trying to rob a moneylender's corpse, or the doctrine of a moneylender, we realize that there is a kind of a big divide in terms of wealth, and it's kind of, it's quite apparent, the chasm that's there between different classes of people. And as I pointed out, that the moral of the story is also kind of highlighted through the way the narrator describes, So it becomes a story of greed. It becomes a story of excessive greed at the end of the day from the narrator's point of view. Right? So if Bhima had been a bit patient, if Bhima had not desecrated the cemetery, things would have been different. Right? So that kind of message is kind of projected to the narrator's point of view. Alright. Thank you for your thoughts, and I hope you had a very productive time listening to the discussion.